Welcome to I'm Perfectly Divine podcast. This is a whole new season. We are in season 3. It's going to be a powerful experience of letting go, being in the unknown, and challenging ourselves. So I invite you to self-select if this is the right podcast for you as we get started to see what happens when we let go of safety and we allow love to move through us. So let's get started.
Welcome to the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast, a place for the strong, sensitive, spiritual seeker to recognize the perfection of your human journey as a pathway to remembering your divinity. I am Michelle Bursell. As a psychotherapist and priestess, my work is to bridge both the emotional and spiritual worlds through proven and grounded frameworks that support you to live in the wholeness you already are. For over the past 2 decades, I have supported people from all around the world, as well as Fortune 500 companies, to dissolve the divisions within them and live with greater empowerment and love. This podcast is an exploration of the paradoxes that befuddle us as we live our lives being both human and divine. Together, you and I, along with other experts, will navigate integrating psychology and spirituality, the divine feminine and the divine masculine, the darkness and the light, to create greater sacred union from within. I believe through your remembering that you are innately divine, that you will allow yourself to more openly shine. So let's get to it, because your unique light is needed more than ever.
Hello and welcome to season 3 of I'm Perfectly Divine podcast. It's a new season for multiple reasons. I want to talk to you about that more today. Really, there's a recognition that I started I'm Perfectly Divine last August 2024 and was divinely guided and to really bring forward this notion of how our humanity is a pathway to our divinity. And that certainly is still where this podcast, what the topic of this podcast is about, where we're going to be going with this podcast. But there feels for me this new expression that wants to come forward. And it also seems like perfect timing because it's a little over a year since season 2. And so season 3, what this is bringing forward for me is how to speak to you in particular, and for you to decide for yourself if this is the right podcast for you to listen to. And the reason why is in season 3, I'm definitely feeling called to be very straightforward for those of you who feel stuck and are ready to grow. And in other words, there's that willingness to put growth over being offended or being triggered. And all those things are human and all those things are beautiful. And that's exactly where we get to grow. And so my point in this is that I am going to be speaking more directly to places that may challenge your perception, exactly because this is where we grow. And this podcast has always been for the strong, spiritual, and sensitive. And with that, there is this time when we have to look for ourselves, be willing to look at ourselves and say, how much is my sensitivity impacting me where I'm closing off more than allowing myself to grow? I mean, certainly the case for me, being an emotionally sensitive person, it's not easy to walk this path, to be human and experience all the input that you're and feedback that you're getting. And somehow we continue to allow that our sensitivity to allow us to be closer to the divine. And then when we receive that external input from another, that we're able to digest it and hold it with greater love. And so this is kind of a self-selection phase that I just want to make sure that you're self-selecting to, because I wasn't always there. It doesn't mean anything if you're not there. If you're like, I am just really sensitive right now, I don't want to be challenged. That knowingness, that self-gnosis is beautiful. That in and of itself makes you on living the way of love, because you're loving yourself where you're at. And so, what I don't want to do as I talk about uh, these different phases that we find ourselves in when we grow is to somehow make one phase better than another, because it's just not the case. We, as humans, we want to, and our egos, we want to think of things linearly, right? Like we just, there's one path to growth, and then you've made it, and you're somehow win a prize, you're better than somebody else. That's not what this is about. This is about being able to distinguish for yourself what your needs are. And so the reason why I have to shift my messaging a bit to be more direct is because I want to speak to those who are in a certain phase where you are stuck because you're going into the next phase of your journey, which is this divine feminine chrysalis that literally turns you into mush. And so I'm going to refer back to the whole caterpillar to butterfly analysis, and I know it's been overdone, but this is exactly the kind of stuff that I want to get into in the podcast, is like stuff that our mind has heard before, but may not be fully embodied in our hearts, or stuff that our mind has heard about, but not in the detail that may help you if you have felt stuck, or you feel like there is more that is ready to grow, more that is ready to expand in love. And so with this, it's me really being able to shift from living a life where I'm holding on to safety to growth is more important for me. And that's who I'm calling forward as well, that where it's so human to want the safety. And again, there is nothing wrong with that. There may be times in our life where that is the responsible thing to do. That is where you are meant to be. And then there is a calling for deeper self-trust. There's a calling to allow the divine to move you in ways that goes against what your mind or your ego is telling you that you should do, right? And so in some ways, I feel like we're always called to do this in our growth journey. And I think that's what makes explaining these different phases challenging. So to go back to my caterpillar to butterfly metamorphosis journey, I've been peeling back the layers to understand more about some of those details, because I'm not really a science person, but I think it's important to look at how we have been given examples to utilize to help us in our own journey to remembering our truth and to living from that truth. And so, with this caterpillar to butterfly analogy that I keep going back to, what I didn't realize are a few things. First of all, is that I thought like a caterpillar kind of spun the chrysalis and then went in there when it was a certain time. And so I just want to break down this because I think this is fascinating and it can speak to where you may be on your journey. So the caterpillar, it molts or sheds a layer um, on average about 5 times before the layer that reveals itself as the chrysalis. So the chrysalis is always within the caterpillar. And so you just have to take off layers, usually 5 layers, to get to this chrysalis layer. And when it's the chrysalis layer, this is when the caterpillar's hormones change, that instead of remaining a caterpillar, it is really being dissolved. The caterpillar body, all its organs and tissues and everything, is being dissolved into this soup. And in this soup, as it dissolves, what gets activated are these imaginal cells. These imaginal cells have always been a part of the caterpillar as well, but they've been dormant. And now that there's this energy of this soup from this raw material of what the caterpillar used to be, the imaginal cells are able to activate into starting to grow into the butterfly, into the chrysalis. And then as the butterflies develop its antenna and its wings and body and so forth, the imaginal cells are being energized, but then the butterfly is still in the chrysalis. And you probably heard this part, that you can't just break open a chrysalis to quote unquote help the butterfly. The butterfly has to utilize this energy and send blood to the wings and start to strengthen its from its abdomen to just all sorts of parts of itself to break open the chrysalis. And otherwise, it won't be strong enough to fly. And so I share this with you because I am very clear that who I need to be talking to right now are people who are going into the chrysalis and or trying to find your way out of it. And that is where I really believe that we come into this place of divine union. And so the reason why it's important to differentiate is because when you're a caterpillar, you're doing different things. One thing that I just love about the difference between a caterpillar and a butterfly is a caterpillar is, obviously it's on the ground and it's eating leaves and it's like of the earth, right? And the butterfly, once it emerges, it is drinking nectar. That's how it gets its nourishment. And it's, of course, of the sky and of the earth. And so it's really understanding that our own metamorphosis can, I think, very much mirrors this, but there's a differentiation that has to take place because those molten phase of the caterpillar are different than the chrysalis. And the chrysalis, I'm going to speak to as definitely a divine feminine stage or phase, gateway that we are called to experience, exactly because everything that we've been told in our human journey or as a caterpillar or on the hero's journey, you have to do the exact opposite when you are being called to go in, when you are in the chrysalis and you are literally being dissolved. And so there is that the hero's journey is still important. The hero's journey is still something that we all go through, where we have to remember our truth and remember our worthiness, and we are building ourselves up to be something in the external world. We are those external components that we are called to create and manifest in our life are so important, and we will hit walls along the way. You'll have dark nights of the soul during the hero's journey, during or being a caterpillar when you're ready to shed another layer. But the tools that you use as the hero or as the caterpillar are different than what needs to happen when you are going on the heroine's journey or you are turning into soup. And so I really want to be able to get very real about this soup phase, and as well as what it takes to strengthen ourselves to be able to break out of the chrysalis and how to know the difference. And so one of the biggest things that will help you differentiate if this podcast is still for you is really, well, there's a few things. One is, have I been stuck in this darkness, this place of nothingness, this stuckness for longer than I care to admit, right? Because typically, a dark night of the soul is kind of a dark night of the soul. There can be this very heavy, powerful breakthrough of the veil. And yet we're still living the caterpillar life because the things that are important to us as a caterpillar still matter. And so the stuff that's still important to us as a hero still matters, where we're looking to that external feedback to define us in some way. And again, I know it sounds like the hero's journey is less than the heroine's journey, but I don't believe that's true. I believe there are some people whose life is meant to get into more of the nooks and crannies of the hero's journey and remain on the hero's journey because that is something important for their soul to do. The reason why I have to differentiate is because I don't think there's enough people talking about the heroine's journey. I don't think we're understanding it enough that it's different than the dark night of the soul. It's different than shedding something. Because we've heard of shedding the veils. It's it is it is turning you into a soup. And when we are turned into a soup, um, it can really be difficult to be here. And it can seem like you are doing everything wrong, that you are lost, and what you are losing is that old identity. You're losing, you're dissolving your caterpillar cells to be the cells of what you were born to be, because it's always been in you. And so what I want to normalize more is the soup that we find ourselves in, because this is when we will lose an aspect of our identity that our ego holds on to, or our humanness holds on to so much that we cannot see how we are meant to live without that. And this is when people end their lives. And so if we don't start to normalize this, that you aren't doing anything wrong, that there's nothing wrong with you, that this is a part of what some people are called to in this lifetime go through, and it's extremely painful, and it takes longer than your ego or your mind ever wants to imagine, but there is a way forward. There is a way to be in the soup, and there's a way to tell when you start growing wings, then we can have a different discussion. And so some of the things that say, I'm not in the soup yet, is that we're still very attached to identities, diagnoses, roles in our lives, that we get offended by anything that may challenge those ideas. And the whole point when we get over here into the soup is that we would rather be challenged and find something that feels of truth to us rather than stay in the muck of it. And so that's what I'm trying to offer. And trying is a good way to put it, because this season is also going to be about, for me, letting go, is practicing what I preach and letting go of the safety of what I've done before, which is I've had notes and I've really wanted to present things to you in a way that I thought was very organized and clear, and to be the best, in podcasting about being imperfectly divine, I'm perfectly divine. And instead, letting that go aside, letting the safety of that go aside and just be with you and just be with how the divine wants to come forward. And this is something that I've been fortunate to experience with one-on-one clients, where I can just let everything go, and then something divine comes forward that isn't mine. That's not it wasn't my idea. It was something that divinely came through. And that's how my book came through. And so this is where I'm being guided to go with the podcast and just see what is going to come through. And I don't know if that divine guidance will show up. Maybe it'll take some practice. And perhaps that's part of this whole experience, is that I can be in this imperfectly podcasting state with you. And there's something about that that's still beautiful, because you're witnessing my growth. And in witnessing my growth, or my letting go of security in my little way, that it reminds you of you letting go of security in some way. And that when we do, it's not always pretty. It's like you take it off the training wheels of a bike and you're like, okay, sometimes you got the momentum and you're going, and other times you fall and you get scratched up and whatever. So there may be some of that. And let me see if there's anything else that wants to come forward. I think the funny thing is, what wants to come forward is in this, in allowing the divine to come through, is that, and being willing to challenge you, is that when I challenge people and their perspective, I swear. And so it's funny, because in like my day-to-day life, I don't swear that much. But what wants to come forward right now is kind of like, prepare yourself. There may be some F-bombs, because when I start speaking about something that's very passionate to me, there's just something about an F-bomb that can just really like nail it. Like, it just gives it a certain emphasis that I'm like, yeah. So I will try to mark these podcasts as explicit. If I'm swearing, because I know you might have kids and what have you, while you're listening, and you don't want them to hear that, that's totally cool. Um, it's just funny to me, because I think there's this like unspoken thing that, like, the more spiritual you are, that you don't swear. And I just feel like the the more spiritual side of me swears. Like, it just, I don't know, there's that extra oomph that comes forward. And maybe that is the divine feminine expression of how that energy that wants us to grow, that is going to be with us in the muck, wants you to know with all seriousness, you are not alone. You are not alone. And this is not about perfection. This is not about getting it all right, like we're trying to do in the hero's journey. It is surrender, it is trust, it is faith, it is the unknown. So today, I don't know if you're watching me on YouTube, but today I have my shirt on, one of my favorite shirts. Courage is a love affair with the unknown. And that's what season 3 is about. There is this unknown piece, there is this known piece of who I want to talk to, and unknown of how the divine wants to express through me. And that I can show up with kind of a topic that I want to share with you, and then see what wants to come forward, that I'm willing to pause and see if there's more that wants to be shared. And to hope that that this can be a place for you if you are in this place. I'm also very much being called to ask you that if you are a woman in this place that knows of men in this place, that you please call them forward. Um, a lot of times with my work, um, men actually, it very much resonates for men, even though I'm talking about the divine feminine, because I think there's something about how the empowered divine feminine, how the warrioress comes forward and just kind of cuts to the chase, that men can appreciate. And so, but it's been through the loving guidance of women that men have found my work. And I am all about, of course, empowering women. I want women to be empowered, and I also want men to be empowered. And I feel like um, men aren't being taught about the heroine's journey. I mean, most of the people aren't, but especially men, right? And so I just want them to know that that has been a part of the guidance that I'm receiving, is that um, this is, if you're going to be, um, well, I'm just going to say it. If you're going to be spiritual and offended, this is not the place for you, because this is about being spiritual and allowing yourself to be challenged. And um, you can call me out. I always want to do it from a loving place. Um, but I think I just want to be clear that that's basically the point of this, is because in that, that's how we will get out of the muck that our ego wants to keep us in. And so when we get triggered, that's beautiful, because that's the muck and that's the way into knowing where we still have shame. And so, yeah, I just want you to be ready for that. And again, self-select if this is for you. Um, Let me see if there's anything else that wants to come forward. What wants to come forward is getting through the muck is so, so worth it, because what we're transforming into is a greater capacity to hold the all, hold the both and, hold that I don't have a right way and you don't have the right way. There's like no one right way. Um, there's just all of it. And so that's why in this beauty of all of it, you get to decide what of the all is going to work for you and what you need at this time. And through that, through being challenged in the muck, you will strengthen. You will remember the love that you are, and you will trust yourself in a way that won't make sense to your rational mind, to your ego, that may look like a mistake. But even in that quote unquote mistake, you're you're being taken to where you're meant to be. And so that's just what I want to model for you, is that I may make mistakes more, being off without a script to go off of, um, and that's going to be okay. And together we can witness what our ego wants to qualify as a mistake and see it, receive it as a greater understanding of ourselves. So, yeah. I'm hearing my ego being like, okay, be quiet now. You've said too much. You've said enough. Um, so what do I want to do with that? I want to share that with you. I don't want to keep that to myself anymore. Why is that important? Because this is how our ego controls us and makes us seem different from one another than we actually are. Um, and it's important that even as I speak and teach on this topic, that I can teach from the messiness of the human self, which is I still have the ego saying stuff to me. Um, but the point is that we just learn to ignore it more. And so together, I guess that's the overall invitation. Is like the ego is still balking in the background, but we just see it, and rather than get spiraled into the story that we're like, okay, I'm just going to name it for what it is, and and choose to find love instead. And this is what I'm talking about, that the muscle that we got to keep building, the skill that we are invited to deepen into, especially if we're emotionally sensitive, because again, I think it's the greatest gift. I think that we have been built to experience love so expansively, just as much as we have been built to experience the freaking pressure of the ego and how brutal it can be. And so we get to hold both. And my invitation is, I guess, what I will be doing is sharing more of that, and inviting you to be able to hold that within you too. So that is what I have for this week. I've got some other things brewing that I hope will um, support you, whether you're in the soup, whether you're breaking out of the chrysalis, whether you're bringing more love and expansiveness as you spread your wings, that this may be supportive to you. And so there will be more on the spiritual aspects and expanding us spiritually. There will be more on the emotional aspects and expanding our notions of emotion from a spiritual lens. And so I think that piece is important as well, because I always bring in the science when I can, but to me, science is always behind, like at least a decade, if not more, because science is a human way of being able to witness and then try to find patterns and try to understand it. So when things come through spiritually, it takes a while for people to be, especially in the science world, to be more willing to witness and study it and be able to bring it forward as a science. So I always want to bring both to you, the science and the spirituality. But from my experience, spirituality is it comes along faster. It is the more advanced route, but I get that desire for wanting some science to say, hey, where else is this making sense? Or we've got to bring our minds along, right? I understand that. So I'll try to do that as much as possible, but I am very much spiritually led. So yeah, if that resonates for you, if this is something that you feel could resonate for another, where they haven't been able to put into words why they feel so stuck, the old tools aren't working for them. This is good news. We are entering into another phase. And the phase isn't pretty, but but that dissolving of the old is very sacred, because it is building you into the expression of spirit that you chose to be when you said, I'm coming back into this world. I'm coming. I'm coming. And so we want you living from that place. And so the whole point of why you were called to go into the chrysalis to begin with, or be the chrysalis, I should say, is because that old way wasn't working in some way. And so the chrysalis is like, let's dissolve this once and for all. And I want to honor that. It's so hard because it's not what we've been taught. So the more we talk about it, hopefully the more we'll normalize it. And I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful that if you're still listening, you get this and hopefully it's speaking to you. And again, if you can share this with others, that would be great because I want people to know um, they're not alone. And we can dissolve this in a conscious way where love prevails and we don't get lost in the fear. So thank you, and I'll see you next week. Until next time, know that there is nothing to prove, just to remember.
I am so honored you have joined me today. If you enjoyed the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast, subscribe so you don't miss any of our power-filled episodes. Also, if you know another who is strong, sensitive, and spiritual and wants to dive deeper into emotions and ancient wisdom so they too can create profound peace and fulfillment from within, please share this podcast. Thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to reconnecting with you soon.